Texas Governor Greg Abbott stunned the state's political world by ordering a new statewide census that would exclude illegal immigrants. But when Texas House Minority Leader Hakeem tried to block the move, the plan instantly backfired, setting him on a path toward political disaster. It began like any other morning in Austin, but by 7 o'clock a.m., Texas politics had been thrown into chaos. Governor Greg Abbott, in his third term and with months of recent national attention for his border policies, stood in the governor's press room at the Texas Capitol, flanked by top advisors and a new team of state demographers. Without warning, he announced an emergency executive order. A new Texas census would begin immediately, and this time illegal immigrants would not be counted. Gasps echoed across the Lone Star State. "I was elected to serve the people of Texas, citizens who follow our laws, not those who broke them to get here," Abbott declared firmly. "This census will reflect the legal population of our state, nothing more." The room erupted. News anchors in Dallas and Houston stammered. Social media exploded. But in the corridors of the Texas Capitol, House Minority Leader Hakeem was already on the phone, boiling with rage. "He can't do this," Hakeem barked. "It's cruel, it's racist, it's un-Texan. I'll stop him, even if it's the last thing I do." He didn't know it yet, but those words would come back to haunt him. By 9:30 a.m., Hakeem was live on Texas news channels, streamed across YouTube and Facebook to millions. He wasn't calm, he wasn't measured, he was furious. "This move by Governor Abbott is heartless," Hakeem thundered, pacing in front of the cameras. "Every human being in this state, legal or illegal, deserves to be counted. They live here, they work here, they raise children here." The host nodded solemnly. Twitter cheered him on. Activists reposted his words like gospel. But as his voice rose, something in his tone seemed forced. "Let's call this what it is," he said, pointing angrily at the camera. "Abbott isn't just excluding people. He's trying to erase them. Deporting immigrants wasn't enough. Now he wants to wipe them off the map." The next words pushed it too far. "Frankly," Hakeem continued, "this governor should consider resigning. The people of Texas have suffered enough." Back at the governor's mansion, Abbott watched the rant in silence. He didn't flinch. He didn't yell. He simply said, "Get me the speechwriter. Tonight, we answer him." As the Texas sun climbed higher over the Capitol dome, a quiet determination settled over Abbott's team. Hakeem had overplayed his hand, and the truth was about to come roaring out. By noon, the tension in Austin was electric. Everyone was waiting. Governor Abbott had scheduled an urgent televised address for 6 p.m. Cameras were already being set up in the Capitol's historic Senate chamber. Staffers whispered in the hallways. Reporters clutched coffee with trembling fingers. Meanwhile, Hakeem doubled down. Holding another press conference on the Capitol steps, he declared, "This isn't just about illegals. It's about humanity. This is a governor who's lost his moral compass. We must fight back." Cheers from his base rang out, but behind the applause was doubt. Why was he so desperate? Why this angry? Few noticed when a small conservative news outlet in Lubbock published a quiet bombshell just after 1:00 p.m. A leaked document from the Texas Department of Public Safety, flagged and shared internally, suggested that an unnamed high-ranking state leader had been sponsoring undocumented migrants not for shelter or aid, but for profit. The report went largely unnoticed, until Abbott reposted it on X with just 5 words: "Full exposure." 6 p.m. Be ready. That single post broke the Texas internet. The countdown had begun, and deep inside his office, Hakeem began to sweat. He thought Abbott was too cautious, too methodical to fight back. He had no idea what was coming. At 3:15 p.m. inside the Capitol, whispers spread like wildfire. A junior staffer burst into the break room of the Texas Capitol, her eyes wide and her voice trembling. "Have you seen it?" she asked. "The DPS leak, the one Governor Abbott just reposted." In his private office, Hakeem was still fielding praise from activist groups and friendly news outlets. He hadn't seen it yet. His chief of staff barged in, pale and breathless. "Sir, we have a problem, a very serious problem." "What now?" Hakeem muttered, half annoyed, sipping his espresso. She handed him the document. It detailed an internal Texas Department of Public Safety investigation that flagged multiple undocumented immigrants receiving suspicious state welfare benefits. The payments were traced back to community housing units registered under shell companies linked to Hakeem's cousin, a man Hakeem himself had appointed as a quiet liaison for community outreach. Hakeem's hand shook slightly. "This is fake, right?" he whispered. No one answered. Instead, someone said quietly, "He knows, and he's going to say it all. Live." That was when Hakeem realized this wasn't political sparring anymore. Abbott wasn't bluffing. This was war, and the entire state, and soon the nation, was watching. The Senate chamber of the Texas Capitol was bathed in warm golden light. Reporters stood shoulder to shoulder. The air felt stiff. Phones were live. Millions across Texas and beyond tuned in. Then the doors opened. Governor Greg Abbott walked in slowly, confidently, like a man with nothing to hide and everything to say. He stood at the podium, looked directly into the camera, and paused. Then he began. "Today, I ordered a new Texas census," Abbott said, "not to divide, but to protect." His voice was clear, calm, almost fatherly. For decades, millions of illegal immigrants have been counted in our state data. That affects voting maps, school budgets, hospital resources, even how federal funds are allocated. It hurts real Texans, poor Texans, Black, white, and Hispanic Texans, legal Texans. Some gasped. Abbott raised a hand gently. "But tonight I want to speak directly to Mr. Hakeem Jeff." The room went still. Abbott pulled out a printed sheet. The Texas Department of Public Safety uncovered a network, housing fraud, fake benefit filings, millions of your taxpayer dollars, all tied to shell accounts registered under your family's names. No one moved. "Hakeem," Abbott said, looking straight into the lens, "you told me to resign. Maybe you should resign from corruption." And just like that, the state stood still. The press room was silent. Even Abbott's fiercest critics looked stunned, not by his tone, which was neither angry nor boastful, but by how calm he was while dropping the political equivalent of a nuclear bomb. Back in his Capitol office, Hakeem Jeff sat frozen, eyes locked on the screen. He looked 10 years older. Abbott's next words cut deeper than any headline. "I've been called cruel, inhumane, for wanting a legal census," Abbott said, his voice suddenly heavier. "But what's truly inhumane is using poor immigrants to pad your political power, to rig elections, to steal from the very people you swore to serve." Hakeem's mouth went dry. Then Abbott added, "And to any illegal immigrant watching this, you were used by men like him." Even some who had long disagreed with Abbott's politics had tears in their eyes. A woman in rural West Texas watching from her couch whispered aloud, "He's not just a governor, he's a father to this state." In that moment, something shifted. Not just in the polls, but in people's hearts. Hakeem didn't respond that night. He didn't tweet, didn't call the local press. He just sat in silence, wondering how he had underestimated the one man he thought was finished. The silence that followed Abbott's speech wasn't just political. It was personal. In homes, diners, and break rooms across Texas, people sat stunned. Many cried, not out of anger, but because for the first time in years, someone had said what they'd felt deep down. Our system was being used against us. In a small-town church basement outside San Antonio, a retired veteran wiped his eyes and whispered, "He's not doing this for power. He's doing it for us." Meanwhile, Hakeem Jeff was in total lockdown inside his Capitol office. His aides tried desperately to spin a response, but it didn't matter. Every major Texas and national outlet, even those usually friendly to him, had shifted their tone. "Hakeem must answer," read a headline on a national network, but he wouldn't. At 6:30 p.m., a second leak hit. This time it was devastating. Images of wire transfers from a known shell company to a property manager in El Paso, arrested in 2022 for harboring undocumented immigrants. The name on the account? L. Jeffries LLC. Hakeem stared at the screen, his face hollow. He knew what was coming next. Fear began to replace rage. It was now 7:10 p.m. Governor Abbott hadn't left the Senate chamber. He stayed back for private interviews with local journalists and Gold Star families. In one clip, already trending with over 10 million views. Abbott sat beside a mother of four who had lost her husband in a drunk driving crash caused by an illegal immigrant. Her voice cracked. Her children clung to her. Abbott gently took her hand. "No one talks about you," he said softly, "but I will." Tears streamed down her face. "I just want to be counted," she whispered, "and for my husband's life to matter." That single moment shattered the internet. Back in the Capitol, Hockey's team scrambled to verify the damage, but it was too late. Reporters had the documents. Investigators had the wire transfers. Whistleblowers from the Texas Department of Public Safety were already giving sworn statements to the legislature. Abbott's press secretary stepped to the podium. "The governor will not tolerate corruption. This census is just the beginning. If you stole from Texans, you will be exposed." Hockey's phone rang nonstop. Reporters, lawmakers, even former allies. But all he could do was stare at the wall. He had thought he was standing for justice. Now the people believed Abbott was justice. By 8:05 p.m., a strange calm had settled over Austin. No press releases, no fiery speeches, just silence. Hockey sat alone in his darkened office. Outside his window, protesters gathered. Not for him, but against him. Some held signs reading, "Stop the theft of our tax dollars. Texas belongs to Texans. Census for citizens only." Tears welled in Hockey's eyes, not because he was innocent, but because he wasn't ready to be caught. He had truly believed he was untouchable. But Abbott, the man many claimed was finished, had crushed him in under 12 hours. On TV, a flashback clip from earlier replayed. Hockey's voice, "Abbott should resign. Texas has suffered enough." Then Abbott's reply, "No, sir. Texas is finally healing. It's you we've suffered from." The clip ended with Abbott placing his hand over his heart. "I will always fight for the people, not for votes, not for headlines, for the truth." It wasn't just a speech. It was a reminder of what leadership looks like. Hockey, once so loud, now had no voice. And Texans were listening to Abbott. By 8:35 p.m., news helicopters circled the Capitol like vultures. Inside, Hockey could barely breathe. His phone buzzed again, this time a message from his communications director. It read only one word, "Rescue." He didn't reply. On the streets outside, more protesters had arrived. Many weren't even Abbott supporters. They were ordinary Texans, seniors, teachers, single mothers, people simply tired of lies. Inside the governor's mansion, Abbott wasn't celebrating. He was reviewing folders marked Phase 2. He looked up at an aide. "Make sure the Attorney General's office does their job. We're not done cleaning house." Meanwhile, a local network aired a live interview with DPS whistleblowers. One, a Hispanic officer named Luis Ramirez, teared up on camera. "I'm the son of legal immigrants," Luis said. "I served this state proudly. But when I saw what Hockey's people were doing, staging illegals to steal funds, I couldn't stay silent." He looked into the camera. "Governor Abbott, thank you for protecting us. The real immigrants, the honest ones." Millions of Texans cried. And for Hockey Jeff, the walls were closing in. He still hadn't spoken, and his silence was becoming its own answer. At 9:10 p.m., Abbott delivered an unscheduled follow-up speech, this time from the lawn of the governor's mansion in Austin. He stood beside a widow named Mary Allen. Her husband, Officer Jeremy Allen, had been killed in 2020 during a violent robbery committed by an illegal immigrant previously released from a so-called sanctuary county jail. Mary's eyes were red. She held Jeremy's badge in her trembling hands. "I wasn't political before," she whispered. "But when I learned that man shouldn't have even been here, I started asking questions. No one answered me." Abbott stepped back, giving her space. "I begged our leaders to stop it," she cried. "I wrote to Hockey Jeff. I sent letters, emails. He never replied. But today, the governor did." She turned toward Abbott, her voice shaking. "Thank you for giving Jeremy's life meaning." Abbott nodded. No applause. Just stillness. The video went viral instantly. Even people who once mocked Abbott began to soften. One Texas influencer posted, "Say what you want about the man. He showed up for her. He's showing up for us." And in his dark Capitol office, Hakeem finally broke. He slammed his phone down and wept. Not out of guilt, but fear. Because now the state was waking up. By 9:45 p.m. in the Texas Capitol felt darker. Not literally, but symbolically. Staffers quietly left Hakeem's office. Some didn't even say goodbye. One aide, a young woman named Tanya, left a post-it on his desk. "I believed in you, but I won't lie for you anymore." Hakeem stared at it, then crumpled it, his hands trembling. He turned on the TV. Every network, even the friendly ones, was airing footage of his shell companies, the DPS files, and the rising voices of betrayed Texans. An old video clip surfaced from 3 years earlier, Hakeem laughing at a rally saying, "Illegals make the cities run." That line now sounded like poison. And then Abbott appeared again on screen. He wasn't attacking. He was speaking to Texans like a father to his family. "I didn't run to be loved. I ran to protect you. Some say I'm too old, too stubborn. But I still believe in Texas. I believe in you." He paused, voice softer. "I will never stop fighting for your right to be counted, not replaced." Tears rolled down faces across the state. Even those who once doubted him began to believe again. In that quiet moment, Hakeem Jeff realized his mask had cracked, and Abbott hadn't even raised his voice. At 10:10 p.m., an unannounced guest appeared on the set of a late-night Texas news show. Her name was Sofia Mendoza, 34. She wore a plain blouse, her hands folded in her lap. She had once been an undocumented immigrant, but now she was a citizen, and she had a story to tell. "My family came here the wrong way," she admitted, "but we worked hard. I got my papers, I became legal, and I stayed quiet. Until now." The anchor leaned in. "I worked as a housekeeper for a campaign office 4 years ago," Sophia continued. "It belonged to someone connected to Hakeem Jeff. They didn't care I was illegal. In fact, they wanted it." Her eyes filled with tears. "They used us, promised us favors, money, protection. Then they used our names to sign voter cards, to forge documents. I saw it." Gasps filled the studio. Sophia looked at the camera. "Governor Abbott is the first person with the courage to say it out loud, and to protect people like me, the ones who did it right." Social media erupted, and for Hakeem, there was no hiding anymore. His so-called compassion now had a face, a broken, used one. Back at the Capitol, the walls were no longer metaphorical. It was 10:45 p.m. The hallway outside Hakeem's office was full of whispers. Several junior members of his own party had gathered, visibly shaken, clutching printed screenshots of the DPS documents, bank transfers, and Sofia Mendoza's heartbreaking interview. Representative Marcus Lowe knocked once and entered. "Hakeem, we need to talk." Jeff looked up with tired eyes. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He simply placed a folder on the desk. "These are signed letters from 7 members of your own caucus, urging you to step back from public commentary until this is resolved." Hakeem's face twitched. "I'm not resigning," he snapped. "No one's asking you to," Marcus said gently. "But if you go on TV now, you'll only make things worse for all of us." For the first time that day, Hakeem felt completely isolated. The same people who had cheered him in the morning were now turning their backs. He glanced at the TV where a clip of Abbott from earlier played. "The people of Texas don't want perfect leaders," Abbott's voice rang out. "They want honest ones." In that moment, Hakeem realized the worst part wasn't being caught. It was that Abbott had become the voice of truth. 11:30 p.m., the state wasn't sleeping. Neither was Hakeem Jeff. His office was dark, except for the faint glow of the TV, which repeated Governor Abbott's speech alongside the growing list of evidence. Then his personal phone rang. It was his mother. She rarely called this late. "Hello," he answered, trying to sound composed. There was silence, then a soft, trembling voice. "Hakeem, is it true?" He froze. "Mom, please don't believe what they're—" "I saw the papers. I saw the wire transfers. I saw that poor woman crying. That officer's widow." Her voice cracked. "Hakeem, I raised you to serve people, not to hurt them." Tears welled out in his eyes. "I never meant to— Oh, I believed in you," she whispered. "But right now, the whole state is hurting, and I don't know if I can say I'm proud." The call ended just like that. No screams, no accusations, just heartbreak. And for the first time, Hockey Jeff felt something he never thought he'd feel: shame. Outside, chants rose louder in the streets and in homes across Texas. People whispered the same sentence again and again: Abbott was right. At 11:50 p.m., as Texans stayed glued to their screens, a live town hall began in a high school gymnasium in Lubbock, organized just hours earlier by a grassroots parents coalition. A woman named Jillian Moore, a fourth-grade teacher from West Texas, stepped onto the stage with shaking hands. She clutched a folder of student photos. "I've been teaching for 22 years," she began, "and for the past decade, I've watched our school funding shrink, but our class sizes exploded." She paused, her voice breaking. "We couldn't figure out why, but this week, I learned we were being forced to count people who aren't even legal residents of this state. That data took money away from our own kids." She began to cry. "I'm not angry at the immigrants. I'm angry at the leaders who use them to cheat, to lie, to win elections." The audience was silent. Then she added softly, "Tonight, Governor Abbott gave a voice to teachers like me." The room erupted in applause. A video of her speech went viral in minutes. One caption read, "He didn't just speak for her, he spoke for us." And in Hockey's office, another post-it appeared on his desk. This one simply said, "You broke our trust." 12:30 p.m. It was officially a new day, but no one in Austin dared sleep. Hockey sat hunched over in his chair. His tie was loose, his eyes bloodshot. His phone buzzed again, but he ignored it. Too many angry donors, too many resignations. Then the door creaked open. It was his longtime political advisor, Demetrius Kane, a man who had been by his side since his city council days. He didn't smile. "Hockey, I think we're finished." Jeff looked up, hollow. "Finished with what?" "With everything." Demetrius placed a folder on the desk. "You should see this." Inside were copies of emails, handwritten memos, and transaction records. The evidence was overwhelming, unmistakable, and one memo bore his own signature. "You told me we were helping the voiceless," Demetrius whispered. "But we were just robbing the system. And now the people finally know." Hockey clenched his fists. "Abbott can't get away with this." Demetrius replied calmly, "He didn't do anything. He just exposed what was already there." He just exposed what was already there. That sentence pierced like a sword, and for the first time since this ordeal began, Hockey Jeff didn't speak. He just sat alone, crushed beneath the weight of his own secrets. After 1:10 a.m., while Texas argued, mourned, and reflected, Governor Greg Abbott walked alone through the quiet halls of the governor's mansion in Austin. A pair of state troopers followed at a respectful distance. No cameras, no staff, just stillness. He stopped at a window looking out toward the softly lit dome of the Texas Capitol. Inside his pocket was a folded note from the widow he had stood beside earlier. It read, "You didn't have to come, but you did. And because of that, I know my husband didn't die for nothing." Abbott closed his eyes. So much noise, so many battles. And yet, at this moment, there was peace. He didn't need applause. He didn't crave revenge. He just wanted Texas to heal. "We're not done yet," he whispered to himself. Back in the Situation Room, advisors were watching polls swing wildly in his favor. But Abbott didn't care about numbers. He cared about faces. The forgotten ranchers, school teachers, widows, veterans, Texans who finally felt seen. As he turned from the window and walked deeper into the mansion's historic halls, the silence wasn't lonely anymore. It was powerful, and it meant the fight for truth had just begun. 2:15 a.m. At a small all-night diner outside Abilene, a local radio station aired a live call-in segment. Voices of the people. "What do you think about the census?" They didn't expect what happened next. The phone rang and a young voice came on. "Hi, my name is Jacob. I'm 12. The host hesitated. "Hi, Jacob, what would you like to say?" "My mom works 2 jobs. We don't have a car. She always tells me it's because people are taking stuff we're not even allowed to get." The host was silent. Jacob's voice cracked. Tonight I saw Governor Abbott on TV. He was helping a lady who lost her husband, and I told my, hey, Mom, I think he really cares about us. Dead silence. The host, usually sharp-tongued, sniffled on air. We do too, Jacob. That call was replayed across Texas. It wasn't just a child's voice. It was the voice of Texas itself, and in his dark Capitol office, Hakeem Jeff heard it. He didn't just feel embarrassed, he felt something deeper. Regret. And this time, it didn't go away. I was free downstairs of AM. Deep on the Fergum, outside a VA hospital in San Antonio, a candlelight vigil had formed. No politician called for it. No media outlet organized it. It was just real Texans, veterans, widows, nurses, volunteers. One man, Sergeant Harold Boone, 74, stepped to the center. He had one leg and carried a small, folded Texas flag. I served in Vietnam. I watched friends die. Not for this nonsense. Not for politicians to rig the system by using people who don't belong here legally. He raised the flag. Governor Abbott is doing what we fought for, protecting our homeland. Cheers and sobs echoed through the night. We're not mad at immigrants, he continued, but we're furious at the men who use them like pawns to line their pockets. A nurse in scrubs clutched his arm, crying. You're not alone anymore, she whispered. And she wasn't the only one. Footage of the vigil went viral. One video showed a veteran kneeling, praying under a Texas flag at dawn. Hashtags exploded. To count Texans, only and Abbott was right. The state wasn't just watching now, and it was rising. Abbott, quietly watching the feed from the mansion, wiped away a tear. It was working. Truth was waking up Texas. 3:45 a.m. Inside the Democratic caucus war room at the Capitol, chaos reigned. Hakeem has to issue a statement, shouted one consultant. We're bleeding trust fast. Others pushed back. If he says one wrong word, it's over. Then Representative Elaine Norris, a moderate Democrat from East Texas, stood up slowly. I can't defend him anymore. Everyone turned. Abbott laid out facts, verified, not rumors, not edited clips, real victims, real numbers, real fraud. Elaine, are you siding with Abbott now? Someone snapped. She didn't flinch. I'm siding with Texas. You should too. Gasps filled the room. Outside the caucus war room, 3 more Democratic aides quietly resigned via email. The pressure cooker had burst. Back in his private quarters, Hakeem Jeff sat staring at the floor. No one had texted him in over an hour. No new calls, just silence. On the table was a note from an old mentor. Power isn't about headlines. It's about trust. And when that's gone, all you have is noise. And tonight, the only person making noise was Abbott. But it wasn't noise anymore. It was a rallying cry. Almost 4:15 a.m., in a quiet veterans hospital in Temple, an old man lay in bed, hooked to oxygen, staring at the ceiling. His name was Cliff Harris, a retired Marine and cancer patient. He had barely spoken in days until tonight. A nurse entered and found him crying softly. Mr. Harris, are you okay? He nodded, barely able to speak. Turn it on, he whispered. The TV. She did. Governor Abbott was speaking again, this time on a special overnight update, addressing Texans who were still awake and those who had never stopped caring. Cliff raised a trembling hand toward the screen. That man's got guts. He says what we're all thinking. The nurse, now holding back tears herself, sat down beside him. Is that why you're crying? No, Cliff whispered. I'm crying because I thought no one would ever fight for us again. Beside his bed sat a framed photo of his son, killed by an illegal immigrant during a robbery in 2007. Cliff hadn't smiled in years, but tonight he smiled through the tears. For the first time in forever, he didn't feel invisible. 4:50 a.m. Texas was running on coffee, adrenaline, and heartache. Local news couldn't keep up. Social media was drowning in emotional testimonies. Teachers, veterans, nurses, kids, and now even former Abbott critics were speaking out. Then came a shocking twist. An audio recording leaked. It was a phone call between one of Hakeem Jeff's top aides and a city clerk in San Antonio. discussing how to pad census entries with unverified head counts tied to undocumented migrants. The first voice was clear. So long as we get the district count up, we get more funding. It's all about numbers, not status. The second voice replied, we got approval from Representative Jeff. He said to keep it quiet. It wasn't just bad, it was devastating. By 5:00 a.m., over 2 million Texans had heard the tape. Abbott hadn't even commented yet. He didn't need to. Texans were speaking for him. Meanwhile, in his office, Hakeem sat frozen, staring at the TV. His political mask had melted, and behind it was a man who now looked defeated, panicked, and finally exposed. The sun was just rising over Austin. Its orange light spilled through the Capitol's tall windows, casting long shadows over tired faces. Governor Abbott sat with a group of Gold Star families in a quiet prayer circle on the mansion lawn. No press, no lights, just silence and sincerity. One father looked up at Abbott with glassy eyes. They said you were mean, cold, but you've been here more than any of them ever were. Abbott didn't speak. He just nodded and squeezed the man's hand. Meanwhile, across the city, Hakeem Jeff finally stepped out of his office. No cameras followed, no crowd waited, just a lonely intern walking beside him. I messed up, he whispered. I thought I could control it all. Spin it. The intern didn't say anything. Hakeem looked at the Texas Capitol dome glowing in the sunrise. Abbott's not just winning, he said softly. He's right. It wasn't a resignation, not officially, but in that one whispered confession, the entire state heard everything. And from the Panhandle to the Gulf Coast, Texans wept. Not because Abbott had won, but because, for once, truth had. Something felt different that morning. One father, Ben, looked at his teenage daughter as the school bus pulled up. Did you finish your civics essay? He asked. She nodded. Yeah, I rewrote it last night. I changed my topic. Oh, what's it about? About Governor Abbott and how he reminded people what truth looks like. Ben froze. Just the day before, his daughter had refused to even mention Abbott in class. What changed? He asked softly. She looked at him, eyes wet. That story about the widow, the veteran, the census, it made me think we forgot who we are. He didn't speak. She stepped onto the bus, turned back and whispered, I'm proud of him now. The bus drove off. Ben stood there, stunned but full-hearted. That moment was shared in a viral Facebook post. Within hours, it had over 3 million shares. It wasn't about politics anymore. It was about truth, family, courage, and one man who dared to speak it when no one else would. 7:15 a.m., reporters gathered outside the Texas Capitol and the governor's mansion. People waited for Abbott's next move, but no official statement came. Just silence. It wasn't weakness, it was power. Then, out of nowhere, a coordinated message went live on all of Abbott's platforms. X, Instagram, Facebook. A single silent video clip. No music, no narration. Just the widow holding her husband's badge. The veteran saluting alone. The teacher wiping tears beside a chalkboard. The 12-year-old boy from West Texas with his mother. The sunrise over the Texas Capitol. At the end, 5 simple words appeared in white text. This is who we are. No logo, no campaign message. And it broke the internet. Local and national outlets replayed the clip on loop. It touched something deep. The soul of Texas. For Hakeem Jeff, the silence felt like thunder. No matter how many words he prepared, none could erase what had already been revealed. Sometimes the loudest truth is unspoken. 8 a.m. Texas was holding its breath. That's when it happened. Governor Abbott agreed to a rare live one-on-one interview with a young female reporter from a small-town TV station in the Hill Country. She wasn't a pundit, just a truth seeker named Lena Carter. She asked the question everyone else had been too afraid to ask. Governor, when they called you cruel, when they called you dangerous, what kept you going? Abbott paused. He didn't smile. He didn't boast. He just looked her in the eye. I remembered the father who buried his son, the mother who lost her job, the teacher who had to buy her own school supplies. I kept going for them, and Lena's lip quivered. She wasn't expecting that answer. Abbott continued, voice softer. They told me to give up, said I was too old, too hated, too finished. But this state raised me. I owe it my best. She teared up as the camera zoomed in. Then Abbott looked straight into the lens. And to every Texan watching, I see you. I'm not giving up on you. Ever. Millions sobbed, not from pain, but from hope. Hope was alive again, and its name was Abbott. 8:40 a.m. In a quiet living room in East Texas, an 82-year-old grandmother named Miss Lorraine sat beside her granddaughter, holding a framed photo of her late husband, a Vietnam veteran. She hadn't watched politics in years, but today was different. She had seen Abbott's interview, the widow, the teacher, the census, the truth. As her granddaughter filmed, Miss Lorraine spoke softly into the camera. I remember when my husband came back from war and no one wanted to hear him. But this morning I watched a governor cry with us, not for votes, but because he still believes in right and wrong. She paused. I didn't vote for that man before, but if he stands for truth, for real Texans, then I stand with him now. The video, captioned, "My grandma said what millions are thinking," reached 12 million views in 4 hours. Comments poured in. I'm sobbing. She speaks for my whole family. I never liked Abbott, but today I understand. She made me call my grandpa, I cried. The tide had turned. This wasn't about party anymore. It was about Texas. 9:20 a.m. Hakeem Jeff finally stepped in front of cameras. The backdrop was plain. No cheering crowd, just a Texas flag behind him and reporters with shaky hands. I called this press conference, he began, not to defend myself, but to speak the truth. The room leaned in. I opposed the census reform because I believed in inclusion, but I crossed lines I should never have crossed. He looked down at his notes, then crumpled them and tossed them aside. I got caught up in power. I let ambition blind me, and I used people, real people, to get ahead. Gasps filled the room. I accused Governor Abbott of cruelty. But last night I watched him comfort a widow, hug a child, sit beside a veteran. I've never done that. Maybe I should have. His voice cracked. I won't resign. I'll face what comes because real leaders don't run. And after everything, I realize now, Abbott never ran. He stood his ground and he told the truth. That line echoed across every station in the state, not because Hakeem saved himself, but because even he couldn't deny who was right. By 10:00 a.m., as church bells rang across Texas, Abbott emerged once more, this time not for politics. He walked into a school gymnasium being used as a census sign-up center. Children clapped, parents cried, volunteers lined up to shake his hand. One young boy ran up to him. Governor, thanks for counting us. Abbott knelt down and smiled. You matter, you always have. And then something beautiful happened. From the Panhandle to the Rio Grande Valley, churches, firehouses, schools, and homes rang bells in unity. Not because Abbott told them to, but because truth had finally rung louder than lies. Texans, black, white, rich, poor, immigrant, native-born, stood together. Not in rage, but in hope. That night, Abbott gave a final statement. We didn't win today because of me. We won because the truth matters, because real Texans are worth fighting for, and because we're not just fixing a system, we're healing our state. Tears poured across living rooms. He didn't brag, he served, and Texas wept, not in sorrow, but in gratitude.